This is the most controversial aeroplane ever made by anyone anywhere. This is the TSR-2. It was the result of an airman's fantasy. In the late 1950s, someone obviously said to somebody in the Air Force, well, give me a wish list, tell me what would be the ideal aeroplane for us to have. So the specification really was something that would fly supersonic at virtually 0 feet and be able to deliver tactical nuclear weapons. And the TSR-2 was started, the British Aircraft Corporation, fundamentally Weybridge and Wharton, set about making this really remarkable aeroplane. I did a lot of work on the development of this aircraft in the 60s. And as a flying machine, it was superb. The great problem was that nobody really had designed a complex weapon system, because what was required was an airplane that would fly at 0 feet virtually, 100, maybe 200 feet, at supersonic. Now, not even Dan Dare can control a flight without putting it into the ground sooner or later. So you've got to have an automatic system. And this was predicated on having a radar in the nose, mapping the ground ahead, telling the automatic pilot in a mile's time you've got a hill or a mountain or a dell or whatever it is. Automatic pilot then sends control signals to the flight surfaces, to the actuators, and moves the position of the aircraft. So if the ground's going like that, the airplane comes and does that. Now it makes it virtually invisible to radar until it's very, very close. And if it's flying at 700 miles an hour, you don't have an awful lot of time to do anything once you've found it. But unfortunately, a whole load of things transpired to make it unachievable. The technical problems alone. Remember, there were no Pentium 4s, there was no microelectronics or anything like that in those days. All the hideously complex electronic circuitry that was required was implemented with discrete components on printed circuit boards soldered. Now, if you look at the undercarriage, just compare the undercarriage of that with the Spitfire, for example. This was designed to work over rugged terrain, and flying at supersonic, you can imagine the G-forces. So the amount of environmental stress that this thing would have had to put up with had it been operational. Then the problem was, another problem was that the manufacture of the radar was not the same as the manufacture of the automatic pilot, was not the same as the manufacture of the flight control system, and they all fell out. It was always his fault. And the ministry also didn't distinguish themselves by their project management. But perhaps the most sinister effect was happening on the other side of the Atlantic. Because in Dallas-Fort Worth, General Dynamics was producing a very similar airplane called the F-111. And they had in mind, as they do, to have this standardized on in NATO. So a lot of pressure was put on the British government. The exchequer was being hemorrhaged by the cost of producing this thing, and therefore the government decided to cancel it and buy the F-111. Americans said, hang on a minute, before we sell you the F-111, we want to be sure you don't have a change of government or a change of heart where you could resurrect this, because they were worried about this. It's a very, very fine aeroplane. So the terms of sale were that all the jigs and all the tools to make this had to be destroyed. And there's a film, if you get the TSR-2 DVD, at the end of it there's this great big conflagration where all this hyper-expensive, hyper-sophisticated jigs and tools to make this airplane went up in smoke. So there are just 2 of these left in the world now, one here and one at RAF Cosford, which, just a reminder, of one of the many things that happened around that time, 1960s, late 50s, 60s, early 70s, where British inventions suffered because of lack of consistent investment and belief, and went to other parts of the world for exploitation, normally the United States. So there's the TSR-2. Well, when the F-111 came in, we didn't buy it. The Americans operated from their own resources around here, among others, Lakenheath, Woodbridge, and so forth. And it wasn't that hot as an aeroplane anyhow. The Australians, I think, are still trying to make theirs work. So that's low-level supersonic ground attack.